What's up guys, it's Will back again, and today we're going to be recapping and reviewing the Game of Thrones episode entitled Blood of My Blood. This episode aired Sunday night, and while it was somewhat of a slow episode, there were a couple of big reveals and setups that we'll get into here. And if you didn't see this from the title already, this video will definitely contain spoilers, so turn back now if you haven't seen last week's episode. So with that said, let's get into it. Alright, so right away we start with the storyline that I think a lot of people maybe care about the most right now, and that's Bran and Meera escaping Bloodraven's cave and fleeing from the White Walkers. Eventually Meera just simply runs out of gas as she's dragging Bran through the snowy terrain, and they see the Whites closing in on them pretty quickly. Now before a really interesting character from the book shows up and saves the day, we get a ton of flashbacks as Bran dives deeper and deeper into the past. Before I start getting into these flashbacks though, credit goes to Reddit user GGman3 for providing frame stills of all these flashbacks. The first one being a dragon flying over King's Landing. This obviously isn't one of the three dragons we know like Drogon, because Daenerys of course hasn't even come close to King's Landing yet, and this vision is from the past, not the future. This is probably the Mad King Aerys Targaryen's dragon. And we actually get a look at the Mad King himself when he says his patent line, "Burn them all." And then we eventually see a shot of some wildfire. And if you don't remember that far back, wildfire was seen briefly in season 2 during the Battle of Blackwater. The Lannisters use it to destroy Stannis' fleet and burn thousands of his men alive. Wildfire is basically an extremely volatile liquid that explodes and burns pretty much anything in sight. It can only be extinguished through sand and not water. The Mad King was having this wildfire stocked up under the city to quote unquote burn them all. Then we get the Night's King from the Battle of Hardhome that you might remember from last season, and then the killing of Catelyn Stark during the Red Wedding. After that we see the Night's King converting a baby to a White Walker, Ned Stark's execution, and Jaime taking on the role of Kingslayer as he kills the Mad King. This scene, as brief as it is something that I've been waiting for ever since Bran has been able to dive into the past. Basically, Jaime kills a fellow Kingsguard member and then kills the Mad King himself as he tries to flee. Then we see Ned in the Tower of Joy with his sister Lyanna Stark and lots of blood. Could this be the R+L=J theory coming to fruition? Basically, R+L=J is a very popular theory that Jon Snow is actually the son of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen, and that Ned claimed that Jon was his bastard son because if Robert Baratheon found out Jon was the son of Lyanna and Rhaegar, he would have had Jon killed. All the blood seen here makes me think childbirth. We then see Jaime actually sit on the Iron Throne after he kills the Mad King, which is an awesome shot by the way. And finally, the Children of the Forest making the White Walkers, which we saw last week, and the White Walker army marching forward. Okay, so back to present time, we get the arrival of a hooded man on a horse with a chain of fire who swoops in and saves Bran and Meera from the Whites. This man is later revealed to be Benjen Stark, the brother of Ned Stark, meaning he's Bran's uncle. He was last seen in season 1 after he decided to go ranging north of the wall and never returned. It's revealed that the Children of the Forest found him left for dead and saved his life by impaling him with dragonglass, which was the same method they used to create the White Walkers. This character is referred to as Cold Hands in the books, and his true identity has not been revealed yet. But lucky us, in the show we know that this undead warrior of sorts is Benjen Stark, so Cold Hands equals Benjen Stark in the show. In the books, Cold Hands equals question marks. I actually really enjoyed all these flashbacks as well as the reveal of Cold Hands. Like I said, Bran's impact on the story has maybe become my favorite part of the show because of the things he can show us from the past. Jon Snow's storyline is also up there too. It's like a 1A, 1B sort of deal for me. Okay, so then we spend a significant amount of time with Sam and Gilly heading back to Hornhill, where just as Sam said, his mother is very sweet and kind, while his father is pretty much just a straight up asshole. We eventually get an awkward dinner scene where Sam is told he's useless by his father Randall Tarley, and then Sam and Gilly decide they're leaving. But not before Sam decides to sneak off with his father's precious Valyrian steel sword. I have a feeling that this won't end well for Sam, Gilly, and Little Sam, because Sam knows that that sword is precious to his father and that he might actually kill him for taking it. This storyline with Sam though is going to have to result in something pretty epic, because otherwise it just seems like filler content and a waste of time for me. I want to see Jon and Sansa recruiting houses and people actually doing cool things, and not Sam taking verbal abuse from his father over the dinner table. I'm thinking this all has to have a big purpose though, and it's probably coming up shortly. Let's hope so anyway. Okay, so cut back to King's Landing and we see King Tommen and Queen Marjorie being able to reunite in the Faith Dungeons. And Marjorie actually tells Tommen that she thinks that the High Sparrow is right and that he has a fresh and interesting take on the world, and I'm just like, Oh god. I really don't think this is some sort of secret play for Margaery here. I think that she's just broken from spending so much time in that cell. And now the High Sparrow has played his mind tricks on Tommen as well, and he's converted him to his way of thought. Because eventually Mace and Olenna Tyrell and Jaime Lannister head up to the Faith headquarters as they think Margaery is about to begin her Walk of Atonement. Well, the Tyrells are just not going to let Margaery be shamed in public like this, so they just bring in the brute force and say, give us Margaery and Loras or we'll kill you all. Well, of course, when we're about to get some awesome action to an episode that truly needed it, King Tommen walks out with some Kingsguard and says that he's basically now been converted and the Faith and the Crown are united in an alliance. Well, of course this happened right when the tension was building. And of course Tommen allied with the High Sparrow and the Faith because pretty much every single decision he's made has been one that probably most of us disagree with. I think it's pretty obvious that the High Sparrow has some ulterior motives at play here because he's just not a guy that seems believable or trustworthy. He's obviously filled Tommen's head with whatever he wanted to hear. And Tommen is not near as bad as Joffrey, but he's not even close to a likable king for me. It's not that he's a little brat like Joffrey, it's just that right now he seems mentally weak. And now he's sided with the High Sparrow and against his own family. He then sends Jaime to the Riverlands to assist the terrible Walder Frey in recapturing Riverrun from the Blackfish of House Tully. Tommen says that Jaime is no longer fit to serve as a Kingsguard, but that is just ridiculous. Jaime was the only one that was really protecting his house, as well as the Tyrells, I guess, too. But yeah, Jaime is heading to the Riverlands, which should be interesting when he picks up Bronn and whoever else. They're also likely going to run into the Starks at some point, which is going to be awesome. Okay, so then we're back in the city of Braavos, where Arya is watching another big Game of Thrones event happen via a parody play. And it's really interesting to see how the public perceives these events that have taken place because these renditions are almost the opposite of how most viewers likely remember them. An example would be when Tyrion is painted as this murdering maniac and someone that killed Joffrey and Tywin just for fun. But from our point of view, they deserved it and Tyrion was probably in the right. For me at least anyway. But Arya is at this play because she's been given the job of killing Lady Crane for the Many-Faced God. Arya poisons her drink but then decides she can't go through with it and smacks it out of her hand before Lady Crane drinks it. And of course the waif is there to spot the whole thing and reports back to Jack and Hagar with the news that Arya has failed. So now we're set up for a faceless bowl, I guess you could call it, because the waif is coming to kill Arya and Arya now has her sword back, Needle, so showdown time. I think this is actually going to be an interesting showdown and bring some much needed excitement to Arya's storyline because up until now it's just been repetitive and kind of stale to me. Next we get a look at the villainous Walder Frey, who if you remember was instrumental in the Red Wedding plot. They're showing us the Freys because I think they're setting up some sweet revenge for the Starks. And the Tully army is eventually going to fight alongside the Starks, I think. The Tullys are fighting the Freys and I think our Stark army will be assisting the Tullys in exchange for their help versus Ramsay. That would be my guess. Alright, and finally for this episode we get to see Daenerys, Daario, and her new Dothraki army heading back to Meereen, but not before she gives another one of her speeches. She eventually flies in on the back of Drogon and rallies the Dothraki and convinces them that they need to sail to Westeros and defeat her enemies. Daario also mentions to Dany that she would likely need 1,000+ ships to sail to Westeros with her full army. And who is actually building 1,000+ ships? That'd be Euron Greyjoy, who bragged about how he was going to wed Dany. Seems like an alliance in the making. But as for the speech, even though it's always awesome to see a dragon on screen, these Dany speeches are just happening entirely too frequently for me. It feels like every episode we hear Dany reel off her list of titles and give some inspirational speech to a group of warriors or something. It just feels like it's happening too much, so Dany's storyline is once again wearing on me a little bit. Alright, so now that we've recapped the entire episode, let me give you my opinion on it. I think it was the worst episode of what otherwise has been a fantastic season. For Game of Thrones standards, this wasn't a good episode because of the pace that was set by the previous 5 episodes. The previous 5 episodes of this season had great dialogue, great action, and an incredible mixing of characters and storylines. While this one is still okay, it didn't really have any action whatsoever. And I get the argument that some episodes will be slower than others, but this episode felt entirely like a setup episode with filler content. While we get some nice reveals of new characters and old characters relocating, I just wanted to see a little bit more action and progression of our key characters. I mean, we didn't even see Jon and Sansa's party at all. I still was entertained with this episode, but judging by the standard that this season has set for Game of Thrones, I have to say I was a little disappointed by this one. The action was okay, the setups were nice, but it would have been nice for some actual payoff here, and I feel like we wasted a lot of time on characters we didn't need to. I'm still giving this episode a 7 out of 10 because even a bad Game of Thrones episode is still good television. It's nowhere near as good as the other 5 episodes this season, but it's still okay. So what did you guys think of this episode? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you liked this video, click that like button and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for future content like this. That's all for now. This is Willfoxification signing off. See you in the next review.